Hi, I'm Matt from hockeyreviews.ca, and this is the PAW. I think these are KP 1000 knee. These are called pads on their website. They also have a knee guard on their website, which is a different model than this. I don't see as nearly as many people have or recommend. These are easily the most recommended knee guard I have seen online. It's kind of like that Passau thing where people always recommend one specific thing. I decided I had to grab a pair of these and test them out, try them for myself, see how good they are. And we're going to compare them a little bit against what I think is the best retail overall knee guard in the Warrior X4 Pro. So we're going to check the sizing on them in terms of bulk. I did a protection test on these. I wore these on the ice a bunch of times. So we're going to take a look at all this to see if the PAW knee pads are actually as good as everyone online says. Now, first of all, in a full disclosure, these were not new. I ended up buying these used, and I wanted to call that out because one thing I noticed very quickly on this is this inner padding, which is the one you land on, is significantly compressed. The foams on here feel like they have been used quite a lot, and the comfort on this is honestly shot. So I am not going to be able to comment on the comfort on these knee pads specifically, and I am not going to judge them poorly for that. So before we jump into this review, my question to everyone is, specifically for knee guards, what is the worst shot you've ever taken on your knee? And what has happened afterwards? What was the result of your knee? Did you get bruised? Did you have to limp off? Did something worse happen? Were you wearing a knee guard? What knee guard were you wearing? And how was it overall? The worst shot I've ever taken was in Warrior X4 Pros, where I took a one-timer slap shot straight to the knee because it was a desperation play. I didn't have my right thigh rise fully closed, and I was just trying to stretch as much as possible. The shooter almost missed the net, came back against where he was coming from because he was from my left side, hit me straight on the knee. I felt it, had a dead knee for about a minute and a half, had no bruising, nothing afterwards, was very impressed with the Warriors. And that player was playing Junior A at the time. So I want to know what your experiences are, your worst shot to your knee was, and how the end results were. First of all, I want to make a few statements on here right away. PAW is a very custom company. They have a ton of options on their website, and they have garter belts like this that are available to purchase. This one came with these knee pads, and you can see how they attach up here, which I'll show off in a second. They also have a bunch of other options you can get. You get different foam options in here, an EVA foam for better landing, which is an upcharge. You can get a gel foam type material in here, which is an even bigger upcharge. You can also order a protective shell that goes over top as well. So they have a ton of options for you to do, and you can choose like the different type of garter belt you want. It is a very custom company in that sense, and when you order these, you give them measurements and they get made for you. So ideally, they'll be pretty close to what they should be for your sizing for every individual user. Obviously, these ones were not made for me. I'm a 6'3" goalie. I'm not skinny, and these ones honestly felt like they were kind of big. The reason I didn't buy these brand new, I have a hesitation on buying new small brands that are always recommended by online people. I have had, to say poor experiences in the past with these companies is understatement. Just to run through that, I have had Passau pads always recommended, which were one of the worst performing goalie gear I have used. I had McKinney pants that was recommended highly to me from people, which were also very not good. I've had a Kineski chest people always recommended, which was also not good. But at the same time, Kova is one of the best gear manufacturers. They make obviously neck guards and suspenders and accessories, but they're fantastic and they're a small company and I always recommend them. And then Maxond is a crazy company which is trying to push the boundaries, and this glove is ridiculously good, and I always tell people to take a look at it. Now, I've had really poor experiences buying from small companies and using small companies. So full custom price for these was just too expensive for me to justify when I have these that are already excellent for me and I won't need to replace them. As well as me buying these used also allowed me to buy the KP Pro CCMs, which I've already done a review on. So I decided to go that route instead of buying these full custom off the hop for their full price. $160 US is a lot of money in Canada now for something that I am honestly just taking a look at for a review purpose and testing out. So I couldn't justify that, but because these are used, it does show you some of the solid build qualities on these. and how they really aren't falling apart at all and they're holding up pretty well. I've had people ask me over and over again of what socks I always recommend, and I've been using Cutshield for a while now, and I've have multiple stuff from them. So Cutshield is a company out of Canada that makes cut resistant socks, and these are their Pro Air 6, which means it's an ANSI level 6 for cut resistance on here. Absolutely love it. I've been using it for a long time. Did a full review of it up there, so you can check it out. But I now have a coupon code with Cutshield, so if you want to support the channel, you can check out the link in the description to Cutshield, buy some socks, which I think are honestly one of the better socks on the market. So check them out. I always recommend them. Use my coupon code, you get 25% off, and it helps support the channel so I can keep making videos and making more content. Otherwise, if you want to support the channel without buying anything, check out links in the description to Patreon, buy me a coffee. Everything through there comes again back into the channel so I can keep making more content and doing real reviews. So first of all, just the overall design of these. They have pretty easy and simple strapping that I honestly hate, and I'll explain why. Because it has this loop that always stays inside. I can't stand these on knee pads because then you have to slide your leg in and they don't pop off really easy. Bauer did it before on their Vapors. Specifically, they had a little piece right here that held it in place so it wouldn't slide up and down. But companies don't really do that all that much. The CCMs don't, these Warriors don't, and I hate that just because, again, you have to slide your leg in and out of them, and I'd rather just be able to unattach it and pull it off. I'm sure there's a reason for that. You do end up getting your double elastic through here, so probably will last a little bit longer, but it's just annoying from a usability standpoint. The top one is obviously, as you can see, just a single strap like this, so everything is good there. When you get onto their actual garter belt, you have a bunch of options on there, and I think you can just ask her to put whatever you want. For me, because I use the Bauer garter loop, this loop works perfectly for me, and the Bauer garter has these little attachment points right here like this, so Velcro. So I ended up using this one with these because I also use that garter belt to hold up my player socks that go over top of my knee pads. There's no reason really for me to really end up using these. The way I attached them was the same way I did the CCMs. I put a piece of bungee cord through here just to make a little loop, and then it slid in there. These didn't slide up and down at all though. I didn't even have to do that tight. They stayed right in place, so they were good for that. How this attachment piece works, you have this garter belt right here, and the garter belt doesn't have a huge part of Velcro on here. You can see it's pretty straightforward. There's no adjustability on it at all, but these are custom made. So generally you're going to give her your size, tell her what you want on them, and she'll probably make them exactly how you want it. How these straps specifically work with this little piece right here, they go through this loop and then they come back and then they go through this little piece right here. So that way they're being held up by the garter belt and you don't really have to crank them that tight if you want to, and it holds right there. Works totally fine. Generally with this garter belt design, you would have to keep them attached to each other when you take them off, which is fine. I personally just like the Velcro attachment pieces so you can disconnect everything, but this isn't a big issue at all. So looking at the rest of these, I'm gonna swap these over because they should have been swapped to begin with. They do have a right and left, and they're not totally uniform. So you can see the nice little branding right here for the right. And when you look at them down like this, you can see how the top pieces are segmented as well, and you can hear it of the plastics kind of hitting each other and rubbing against each other. There's a plastic piece on this one right here, which is folded in like this. You can touch the edge. There's a plastic piece right here. And then right here, there is just two pieces of foam, which is kind of interesting because this is the more inside of your leg, but this will also kind of be under pants for the most part. But just to prove, like you can see how I can fold this. So if there is plastic in here, it is so thin, but it does feel like a hard foam and not a plastic, especially compared to the outside right here and the rest of it. So kind of interesting that this piece right here doesn't feel like it has a plastic in it. You can see how I can bend the tops like that, where you go over here and you can't bend it at all. Interesting design with that, but it is segmented. So when you do wear it on your leg, this will be on the inside and will wrap a bit. Now going on to the connection point in the bottom piece, you have a segment right here, which you can see right here, and you can feel the edge of the plastic there and the bottom piece right there. So you do have a plastic insert that is right here at the bottom for protection on that brake part right there. And then down at the bottom, you just have your foams, and the inner landing foam is thicker than what is on the outside, as you can see like this. And I'm sure this would have been thicker when it was new. It is very compressed. It doesn't feel uniform at all. Like I can feel where the compression is. There's a lot of landing that was going on up here versus down over here, which is a bit thicker. So I can definitely feel that these have been used a lot, and you have a decent amount of padding right here, and it doesn't have plastic coming down here, but it is a decently thick foam. You can see through this, the foam thickness kind of everywhere, and looking back here is a decent job, but this material kind of gets bunched up a bit and isn't necessarily the best indication, because when you actually like push this material down, you can see you have a foam thickness back here of about, like I'm trying to get that, of about that, which is not awful. And it is a relatively strong piece of plastic. And you can kind of see how thick it is through the edge, because the bottom of my index finger right there, that is the thickness right there. So not the thickest piece of plastic, but it still does have a decently hard piece. Like I can't really fold this that way. So it's good in that sense to protect you. And then you have that padded material behind it as well. Now with this overall design, because it is for all intents and purposes a one piece, it does leave a lot to be desired in terms of actual coverage. And you can see that when you just close your leg, and you can see it in my video when I'm in my butterfly, when I did the test. This doesn't seal everything you want. So the perfect drop on this just doesn't really cover the whole inner piece of your leg, covers directly in front, then there's always something right here. And when I put this on and you can see it, obviously you're worried about when it comes down here, but you can see how this piece on that knee bend, there's nothing there. And I talked about this in the other view, but I want to reiterate this right here. This is a little bit of foam for landing, but there's no plastic piece coming down here, and there's no plastic pieces right here either. So the main protection part has to be either right here or some reason on the outside of here, which also isn't necessarily the big part of getting hit on your knee pads. When you go down, generally your inner knees are going to be exposed a lot more than your outer knees, because that's going to be up against a pad. So a puck can hit here. And even if it doesn't go all the way through, if it hits this, this is still not padded enough to actually be protective. And if it does happen to miss that, it's going to go straight to your knee. And even on this part, like that foam is going to be not protective enough, and same with right here. So you have the only real protective parts right here and right here. I don't think this gap right here, because there is a gap in actual where the plastic is, it won't cause an issue. It's close enough and tight enough that it will be fine. And that really isn't a huge concern of mine. For the PAW knee pads, if you haven't seen my video on the Warriors and how they have that outer plate, I suggest you check that out, because it would be a good contrast compared to what these are. Now I talk about that plate on the Warrior because it wraps really well and gets everything on the side. As you can see right here, that is my bare knee right here. And yes, I'm pulling this up a bit to expose it. But when you're sitting right here like this, that is bare knee. And people are saying these are one of the best and most protective knee pad on the market, and everyone recommends these. And that right there is basically this little piece of foam stopping the puck from hitting my knee. So I'm not really looking forward to doing this puck machine test, because if I get a puck right here, that's my knee. Like right there is straight my knee, where this is obviously the shell. And that obviously isn't the best design. Now, I'm not wearing these backwards. You can see the strap is on the outside, like all smart knee pads are. And the design of this is, well, that one has more folds on it. So even if I wore it on the outside, it would be the same thing. That little spot is a knee piece right there. So when you go down on these and you kind of sit on these like this, if you get hit right on, it's obviously gonna be okay. If you get anything like this, that's when it's not the best. And you can definitely see when, like if ever you're stretching and something just hits there, that's gonna be open. So not looking forward to this test. But even like this, I can feel that just by doing that through there, which is not a great thing. And as a comparison, when you look at the Warriors, you can see the side of your knee is always covered by a hard cap. And then it also has multiple layers underneath that is going to disperse that impact and keep this away from being right on your actual leg. Now you could right here get that as the impact, but when your knee's actually bent like this part is more or less covered behind here, but this whole spot is a lot more covered than what is on the paws. Now, continuing to speak about that coverage a little bit before we get into the protection test. When you look at the actual padding behind here, you can see you have this plastic insert, which I talked about right here, and then you have the foam, but this is kind of misleading because it bulges out. But really, when you kind of just push the material inwards, you have a foam of about that thickness right there. As a comparison, when you have these Warriors, which I'm using these because I think these are one of the best all around knee guard. So you have a foam in here, which is as thick as that basically back piece. It feels pretty close. You have this inner shell, and then you have that outer shell as well. So all of that will be right behind a puck impact to disperse that. On top of that, because these overlay each other, if this piece isn't fully spread out like this and is more down like this, you also get this inner piece for coverage as well. So if you're down like this and this piece is anywhere on the inside, you're getting multiple layers on there, and this plate is being pushed away from your knee, which is what you want on that impact dispersion, and you have more padded things behind. With the paw, you don't have anything from this plate that really does the impact dispersion. You have a foam, but it's not very thick, as you can see, and it doesn't have anything over top being a shell kind of acting as that. And since we've been talking about this coverage and how the protection layering is done, we're going to do the knee pad test with the puck machine, which is what I've done with these Warriors, as well as with the CCM KP Pros as well. And you want to support the channel, and you need a base layer and a protective, kind of supportive base layer that helps protect your growing as well as your hips. Check out the Cortec. This is the Pro 1.0 pant, so this one is not quite as restrictive, and this is kind of tight right here in this X pattern. You might have seen these as Under Armour before, or Bauer for the hockey specific ones. There's also the Core 3.0, which is a lot stiffer, as you can see. Really helps protect my growing and keeping it kind of in place and make sure it doesn't overstretch itself. There's a discount code, and you click the link in the description. Use that discount code to get a discount off, help support myself, as well as get you some pretty awesome base layer pants that really do help with injury prevention and help stabilize your core while playing. Otherwise, if you want to support the channel and you don't want to buy anything hockey related, you can check out the links in the description to buy me a coffee. Anything that goes through any of the links always comes back into my channel so I can make more content and do more videos. When I did this test and I only had the one impact on the front, I was a bit disappointed because I didn't get hit with more of the shots, but then I realized how close those middle ones were to being hitting my knee right here. And if that one hurt as much with this plastic piece, with this no plastic in here and pretty condensed foam already and not thick enough foam for actual protection, that shot going right into here would have absolutely destroyed my knees. So on one hand, I'm disappointed that I only got one contact point, which gave me a lot of data in terms of how poor it did. But at the same time, I'm really glad it was a near miss every time between these, because that would have been an extreme amount of pain and maybe worse. That was the worst impact I have felt in my knee pad test, and I have tested Passaus, which also weren't very good, to be totally honest. I have tested these Warriors, I've tested Bauers, I've tested the CCMs. I've actually tested these Warriors like 4 times now, and this one was by far the worst, and I got it, you'll see in the video, just right where you should get it. It wasn't even on the just foam part on the side. It wasn't on the mist part. It was straight on the plastic itself, and it was by far the worst I have done on one of these tests. This was my kind of fear for these knee pads, and I saw it the second I saw the design. When you look at these knee pads in general, the design is very reminiscent of those Bauer X900s. Now these have a plastic insert. Bauer's, I'm pretty sure, were just a foam. The whole design itself is basically what you'd expect from a one piece, is basically the same as those very low level knee pads. And I noticed how they didn't have a plate, and really they need that plate. They need something that's actually covering the inside of the knee. Definitely needs that shell, because that inner side right here is just like, that's exposed, and that is not good. If you're stretching out here and even this bent, not enough coverage of your knee right here. Going down again, that's open, and there is only soft foams on the inner side, which is where the pucks are going to hit. This is my left, so this would be the left knee right here. Pucks are gonna come here, not from the pad side. And when you look at the cap itself too, it doesn't have enough dispersion behind that plastic piece, which for all intents and purposes, this is really solid and really hard. If the actual shell was made out of this, I would be totally fine with that, to be honest. But it needs to float on top of this, and it needs thicker foams behind it to actually give impact dispersion. Because this foam right here, when I took that on my knee, that went directly in there. And again, you have a piece of plastic right here that is that thick, and you have a foam that is really that thick. This is, again, misleading because it comes out, it is that thick, but that went right through the actual guard and right into my knee and was not comfortable at all and was very disappointing. Those aren't super hard shots at my knee. And I am very aware of knee problems, so I always tell people to protect their knees. So I'm not shooting like 80 miles an hour. Those are very controlled shots to make sure I don't destroy my knees. And this protection test on this one did very poorly overall, but it is super disappointing. And I was hoping of some miracle based on all the amazing feedback people give online on it. And it just totally failed in that regards. And it leaves me extremely disappointed. Even though I don't really like the CCM KP Pros, that knee guard performed spectacularly better than what this one did. And that's not good at all because those weren't good either. Now, one thing I do have to give PAW credit for is this design leads very solidly into the lack of slipping down your leg. It is a one-piece design. This one locks in relatively well, but when you go down, it kind of locks in place, and this doesn't really want to slide down all that much. But even here, the only way this is really coming down is if I push it. So if you do have your pants that are pushing down, it could be a problem. I never noticed this moving whatsoever when wearing it, so it totally worked fine in regards to that. Now, one thing everyone says these are fantastic for is how slim they are and how they are the slimmest and actually protective knee pad on the market. And I also question that because when we take a look at these side by side, yes, this will fold over more, but this is just massive. And yes, you can shrink this by, I believe they say an inch, which is about that. Off the top of this, there's so much overlapping of pants on these. I just was amazed at them and how tall they were without a real reason. You don't really need that extra pant coverage. Your pants should do that job. You just want a little bit of overlap. And when we compare these, and I'm going to do a few measurements on here compared to my Warriors, wrapping this, just the whole width of this is about, if we do it tight, 60 centimeters all the way around. When you go side by side, like the whole coverage of this, it's about 27-ish centimeters all the way across from the front facing of it. And when you compare it to the Warrior and you wrap this all the way around at the thigh, this one is 58.5 centimeters on here. And when we do the actual coverage over here, we get more at 32.5, but you can see the difference of how this is just wrapped around my actual leg. These, which are actually adding bulk at that thigh. Now, the big difference on here and where these ones will be considerably slimmer is actually at the knee, because the actual knee part right here is much smaller. You can see how tiny this is. And this wrapped around is going to be absolutely nothing because there is no padding on the side. But really, I'm going to do it up here to be a little bit more fair. Because right here ends up being 58.5. And then you get to the shell on the Warrior, and this is where the Warrior is going to be bigger. And we wrap this around, and it's 59. So you gain a centimeter on the Warrior, but you're getting this plastic cap all the way around here. Now, that number for the Warrior is also right on the protective part, which is directly on the knee. So it should be this part right here. So we put these on and we wrap this around, and we see it ends up being pretty small down here. It ends up being 54 centimeters on the side. So this is the tiny part right here, but everything else up here is bulky. And this landing spot down here, we'll see this compared to the Warrior as well, which is 48.5 centimeters. And we grab the Warrior, and the Warrior is 47.5 centimeters. So you can see the real difference between these two, this cap versus right here. But when you're actually wearing these, the upper portion of this is still pretty big. And because it doesn't wrap around your leg as much as this does, like this really just forms around your leg, and it covers so much more down the sides than what the PAW does, where it just sits on the top, that you do have a thicker piece right here with this plate versus the PAW. But that plate part, when you actually go in the butterfly, is not interfering with anything. When you're standing up straight up like this, yes, you're gonna have more interference right on this piece versus this piece. But once you drop in the butterfly, you can see the Warrior is actually slimmer everywhere than what the PAW is. And when I stand up totally, this never sat totally flat either. So this is how it is, but the second I go down and the second this moves where it is, this still comes up and is still out. Yes, it's a bit more streamlined here, but you can see how much more is exposed here. And over here where the Warrior just kind of folds over, this has such thick padding up here that isn't necessary. So its slimness is really just this spot, and everywhere else is not slimmer than the Warriors, which some people say are too thick. Now, I understand everyone's legs are going to be different. Maybe you need an intermediate size, but when I was wearing these felt like one of the bulkier knee pads I wore, specifically because of the pant. They interfered with pants a lot, and they just were in my pants a lot. I didn't have issues with it pushing my pads down, which is a thing with knee pads. When you have really big knee pads like those KP Pros, they do feel like the pad, instead of sitting just straight up your leg, kind of goes on an angle. This, I never had that issue, but I don't have that issue with the Warriors either. I'm also very confused at how everyone says that these are the slimmest knee guard on the market, which is also the most protective. Because if you want this level of protection, you can get it in so many other knee guards. The Warriors are one example. The Vons are another example. The Bryans are another example. Basically, anything with a cap is going to be better than what this is. And except for the PAW Pros, which have a gap, which allows that plastic to hit your knee directly. The whole thickness of this too is also nowhere near as slim as everyone was saying, and it very confuses me how people can get down to that conclusion. When you put things side by side, they're a lot closer to each other. And as you can see, when these are being worn, you can see how much more this takes up in this block compared to the Warrior. And going up the pants, the Warrior, when I don't pull these pants up and hike them, you can see the actual coverage. The Warrior has that double coverage, but isn't going way up here, versus the PAW, which is way up here. So when we pull that down, it's way up there. So it has all this extra bulk in the pants as well, which isn't needed. But when you look at these two next to each other, a ton of people say that these ones are too bulky, and the PAW is the one they recommend. But you look at the difference, and this is coming past the block, and this is even touching the pad over here. So the bulk on these things, where people say they're so slim, I just can't see it. And when you put these two actually next to each other, it doesn't really show that off either. And since I know people are going to jump in and say, when you look at that last video, the area it lands on right here is smaller. When the top still hits the corner of the pad and pushes it out, it can't be considered smaller just because it comes to a point. The Warriors as well, the cap is misleading of where you land on and where you end up dropping down. Down here ends up being basically the same as what is down here, but the cap itself looks like it ends up being lower on the block, and it's not even touching the block. So you really have to compare the max widths of it of up here. Yes, this little angled piece will be smaller overall, which looks like the contact point is less, but as long as you're not landing on this shell straight down, your contact point is going to be the similar size, and then the actual shell right here ends up being the similar size to what this is. This part ends up touching your pad still and still creating all that extra space, where this one, it's going to be very similar. And honestly, I think it could use an outer shell and change the design up a bunch to make it also lighter as well, because these are not super light. They're heavier than what these X4 Pros are, and these things get super wet, and these things get even heavier when they get wet, which not really obviously a scientific test, but these things get just absolutely drenched in sweat with this gray Nash material, which is a pretty similar material to what is on the inner part here, but there's a lot less, and the top pieces of here do a lot better job of venting and just not being as soaked as what this Nash does. And this Nash stuff is honestly super warm, and I overheat on it a lot. Now, as a whole conclusion of this, and understanding that people like different fits, and a lot of things for goalie is personal preference, I'm totally okay with that. I never tell people they need to buy a certain glove. I always tell people the pros and cons of each. I'm not someone that buys something and has to justify. I found when I bought something, I didn't like it, I wanted to tell people I didn't like it so they didn't make the same mistakes I did. If this knee pad works for you, great, that's fine. If it's your preference, if you feel this one ends up being slimmer than this one on your leg specifically, that's fine. That's great, go for it. But I have seen so many people comment about protection on these, and same with those KP Pros, and I've done the protection tests, and you can just see it with the open coverage and everything. It just kills me to see constant comments of how great these are and how slim they are, which when I looked at them side by side, are they really that slim? How protective they are, which they absolutely aren't. It's crazy that people keep saying this over and over again, and yet my experiences are so different. I'm just amazed at how many times I have tried the best, and I put air quotes over and over and over again, from online people's comments, try them out, and how disappointed I am with it. I don't know if it's buyer's remorse or just a buyer's bias to it. This is another case of it, and I'm glad I did not spend the full retail price of this, because me buying the CCMs, taking a look at those, and these at a much cheaper price than what they were full price. Allows me to buy other stuff, and I will buy the upcoming lines of knee guards from Bauer as well, so I can test those out and take a look at them because they do have a new model for 2025. I already know people are going to say this wasn't a fair review because these are used. The protection pieces on here, which is my biggest gripe, and the overall fit of them isn't a difference between them being used or new. That's going to be the same over everything. The foam back here isn't broken down. It's still thick. I can feel it's still thick, and it is totally fine. Foam here is broken down on the landing, but I'm not giving these a poor rating for comfort because I know that these are broken down. And they are honestly one of the most overhyped things in the goalie world. I don't hate small companies. I love small companies. I talked about Maxon. I love Kova. I always recommend Kova. They're fantastic. This should be so much better, and it could be so much better, but it significantly needs to change its design in order to be protective enough and not really expose your side of your leg. That's just a thing that I would not risk my knee for whatsoever. I know people don't like knee guards. It's fine. Do what you want. I'm not going to police that. I think you're risking your knees. You're risking your knees with these two, with that side piece. If I took that slap shot that I took with these ones, with the paws, it would have been significantly more of a problem than it was with this, where I just shook my leg off and it was fine. I'm sure people are going to tell me how they face absolutely massive bombs in these and they performed absolutely spectacularly. I took about a 65 miles per hour shot with this and it was the worst protected knee pad I've worn. That's not good. And increasing that speed is not going to make that better. PAW is a small company. They're all hand built. A lot of it's all custom made. That's great. The quality of this is there in terms of the seams and everything are holding up. These are clearly used and it doesn't feel like it's falling apart at all. Yes, the foams are gone on here, but that's not a problem with the company itself or the actual knee pad. That's just usage is going to happen. You see a lot less things like these loose threads. You can kind of see on the Warriors and on like how my jock is pulling up on the seams on the Warriors. You're getting a better product in terms of that from the PAW. This is an easy not recommend. I want these to be better. They should be better. They definitely need a plate. I don't think you need a lot of things in here. This could be very revamped to actually make it protective where you need it. You don't need this massive piece of plastic and this foam back here at the top of your leg, which is all covered by pants. That's not necessary. You can streamline that. You can actually put the padding around, put a plastic piece here. There's so many things to make this a lot better that can be done. And I hope they kind of do. For now, one of the most disappointing products I've ever tested out. This is a very long video like all my videos, but I have to talk about it, I have to review it, and that's it. So I know people are gonna hate this, but I have to be honest with my feedback and I have to actually test stuff, which I did on here. Wore it in a bunch of games, wore it in a bunch of shinny sessions, wore it a lot, then went and tested it with the puck machine. I have my experiences. They're not good. That's about it for this video. Thank you very much for watching this video. Subscribe to YouTube. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Links are in the description. If you want to support the channel so I can make more purchases and buying more gear, I'm planning on doing a ton of knee guard tests in 2025 with Bauer's new lineup and probably Warriors if they offer a new line as well. Buying hockey equipment anyways. Check out the links in the description. If you're in Canada or the US, to Just Hockey. If you're in the US, to Pure Hockey. Clicking those links, making a purchase gives me a kickback, helps support the channel so I can keep making more purchases and doing more videos and tests like these. Otherwise, if you want to support the channel without buying anything hockey related, you check out the links in the description to Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. Everything through any of those links always comes back into the channel so I can keep making more gear purchases to do reviews. Thank you very much for watching and take it easy.
You're watching HockeyReviews.ca.